Speaker for today's episode, I'm sure many of you people know him, but for anyone who doesn't, um, we're joined by Sheikh Saqib Hussain. Sheikh Saqib did his undergraduate at Jesus College in physics before taking a few years off to study Arabic and Islamic studies in Syria. He then returned to do a master's in Islamic studies and history and is now currently doing a PhD at Wolfson College, looking at the relationship between the Quran and the Bible. So alhamdulillah, we're very blessed and grateful to have such a well-renowned person of knowledge joining us today. Today's topic will be looking at the ordeal of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam as he was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to confront Pharaoh and what lessons we can learn from that. So without further ado, Sheikh, you can take it from here.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin al-Amin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli, amin ya rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I pray everyone's having a beneficial and a spiritual Ramadan, and despite the unusual circumstances, is benefiting from these conditions. I'm benefiting from these days. I wanted to look at the dua of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam recorded in Surah Taha, and a few verses that also mention it in Surah Ash-Shu'ara. It's a really beautiful dua. It'll be familiar to very many of you. One often hears it at the start of a khutbah, or at the start of any sort of religious speech, any bayan, because of some key phrases that Musa alayhi salam uses in it, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for clarity in speech. On a personal level, it's a dua that I frequently use myself, frequently make, especially when I'm about to write something, because it's a dua for clarity, it's a dua for clear communication. So before I'm about to write an article or write a chapter or work on my thesis, I try to remember to begin with this dua. And inshallah, it's a very beneficial one. It's a good practice, and if you were to make it a part of your habit, inshallah, you'll notice its effects. So Musa alayhi salam, let's start. See if this works. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background as to what's going on, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the story, but just to quickly run through it. So what's happened? So way before Musa alayhi salam, the Israelites, the children of Yusuf alayhi salam, of Yaqub alayhi salam rather, have come to Egypt and are a migrant community who are an economic success story. So one of Jacob's sons, Joseph, Yusuf alayhi salam, is a senior minister in the court of Pharaoh. He brings over his brothers and their wives and their children to settle wherever they want, to take prime real estate in Egypt. And really they become economically very successful, right? So, but they're nonetheless a minority group who are growing and who are prospering in this foreign land. What happens over time is that they become a scapegoated foreigner, right? So they go from this position of privilege to a position where the host community, the majority, is viewing them with suspicion. And what this leads to is their eventual enslavement. And following that enslavement, the massacre of their newborns. So several generations after the initial migration into Egypt of Jacob and Joseph and the founding fathers of the Israelites, you get a situation where the rulers of Egypt, the new Pharaoh, they no longer recall what it was that Yusuf did for them, how Yusuf alayhi salam, really saved the Egyptians from starvation at a time of famine. And the economic contribution of these original migrants, what that was. And instead, the focus is on how these foreigners are taking over and how they're becoming really strong. This is very explicit in the biblical account. They're becoming far too strong. And so how are we going to beat them down? And there's two ways that are adopted. One is enslavement. So the population is enslaved. And the other one is massacre. And this is the one that the Quran mentions as well. So the newborn males are killed, and the newborn females are kept alive. And this is just a way of a genocidal way of slowly wiping away the population. And so at this time that Musa alayhi salam is born, and his mother, to try and save him from the soldiers who are looking for newborn children, and as he cries, he's going to be discovered, puts him into a reed basket and casts him into the river. And he's eventually found by the wife of Pharaoh, who convinces Pharaoh to adopt this child into the household. So he's raised in the house of Pharaoh, and it's known that he is an Israelite child. But despite this, Pharaoh decides to adopt him and raises him in his own household. As he grows up, an incident occurs which sort of changes the course of his life. So he goes from being a prince living in the luxury of Pharaoh's court to becoming a refugee. And what happens is he witnesses an altercation in the city between an Egyptian and an Israelite. And taking the side of the Israelite, because he sees the Egyptian at fault, he hits him, he strikes him, and inadvertently he takes his life. So you can see he's clearly, there's an indication there of his physical stature and his strength. So the Egyptian has died. Musa alayhi salam, Moses gets news that the courtiers, the princes of the court, are sort of plotting against him. One has a sense that they weren't very, very comfortable with an Israelite growing up in the house of Pharaoh anyway, and this is the kind of the excuse they needed to do away with him. And so he runs away, becomes a refugee. And he goes to Madian. He goes there, he meets his father-in-law to be there, he works for him, he gets married, he has a family. And as he's traveling one day with his family after several years, at least 7 years away from Egypt, he sees this light at the top of a mountain. He doesn't really know what it's all about. He tells his family to wait. He's going to go investigate. And there he has this encounter with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And God tells him, he commissions him and gives him his task, his mission, that he has to go back now to Egypt. He has to go back and confront Pharaoh. So we have this this verse, this ayah in the Quran, some version of it repeated in several surahs: go unto Pharaoh, go to Pharaoh, truly he has rebelled. Right. So we need to think about the context here. So in some ways, Musa alayhi salam is the least expected choice because of his background. He's already committed manslaughter, so going back to Egypt is going to be horribly dangerous for him. He's part of a community which is downtrodden and suppressed and is considered worthless in Egyptian society. So for any Israelite to go to Pharaoh and make demands is going to result in that person's life being forfeited and the person's life being taken. And okay, good. Yeah. So and then he owes them. He's been brought up in their household. So they not only have they raised him, he then has, in their eyes, repaid their favor by taking one of their lives, by siding with the wrong party when it came down to it. Okay, and then he's been living as a refugee. So he's really someone who has very little status anywhere. He doesn't have a homeland. He doesn't have any sort of a power base, anyone really to support him. So if you look at collectively his profile at this moment in time, you would not think that this is the man who should go deliver this news to Pharaoh. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his wisdom says that he's chosen him, and he says, go into Pharaoh. Truly he has rebelled. Innahu tagha. So at this point, Musa alayhi salam makes this incredible dua of a few verses that we're going to go through, and that's going to be the central focus of the next few minutes, inshallah. And it's a beautiful dua. I'm just going to go through it verse by verse and think about exactly what is it that he's praying for. So he begins, Rabbi shrah li sadri, my Lord, expand for me my breast. So he begins with Rabbi, my Lord. So this is a very common opening phrase, an opening formula in Quranic dua. So if you look at virtually any dua that appears in the Quran, whether it's by a prophet or a dua that we're encouraged to make, it begins with Rabbana or with Rabbi, sort of an acknowledgement of the relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is our master, right? So if He's our master, He's therefore in complete control, not just master, but Rabbul Alameen, the master of all creation, of all peoples. And therefore, for Him to give us what we're asking for Him to facilitate the situation in a way that we get what we want out of it, is facile beyond words. And then the word Rabbi is related to Arabic Rabba and Tarbiyah. Rabba to nurture someone, to bring someone up, to bring someone to full maturity. Tarbiyah is also the word we use for educating someone. So the idea behind calling someone Rabb is that this being, this person that you're calling out to, this divine being that you're calling out to, is able to give you the maturity, able to give you the growth, able to give you the education that you need to accomplish what it is that you want to accomplish. So in other words, there's already a tacit acknowledgement here that what you want from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to bring about the situation within you to enable you to do what it is that He's asking you to do. And there's a recognition of submission here, right? By calling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Rabb, you're recognizing that you're abd, that you're His slave. And furthermore, you're recognizing that you need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you the maturity, to give you the development to accomplish what it is that you would not be able to accomplish without His aid and support. So this is how he begins his dua, with the Rabbi. And then expand for me my breast, Rabbi shrah li sadri. So what does this phrase mean? It occurs several times in the Quran. So if you just look at a couple of ayat where it occurs, it helps us to contextualize exactly what it means and to kind of derive what it means from the way it's used in those other verses. So we have in Surah Al-An'am, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whomsoever God desires to guide, He expands Islam. Yashrah sadrahu lil Islam. Whomsoever He desires to lead astray, He makes his breast narrow, tight, as if he were climbing to heaven. So imagine climbing a mountain. As you get higher and higher, the air is getting thinner and thinner, and you're finding it more and more difficult to breathe. So that's the image that's being presented here. So God, we can try and understand what sharh as-sudur is, what sharh as-sadr is, what the expansion of the breast is, by looking at its opposite, right? So its opposite is constriction, tightness, being out of breath, finding it difficult to breathe. That's the picture that's being presented here. And then again, in Surah Al-Zumar, is he whose breast God has expanded unto Islam. So he walks in a light from his Lord. But woe to those whose hearts are hardened against the remembrance of God, those who are in manifest error. So we have a connection here between the chest or the breast being expanded, sharh al-sudur, and walking with a light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we also have an indication of how this comes about. Why is it that some people achieve this and other people don't achieve this? It says, woe to those whose hearts are hardened against the remembrance of God. So it's the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is being indicated here as the means by which the heart becomes expanded. And that's also something that Musa alayhi salam will mention in his dua. So bringing all those ideas together, what we get from Sharh as-Sadr, that it first of all indicates confidence, right? Indicates being able to breathe without constriction, indicates being able to communicate without being overwhelmed. And this is going to be really important for Musa alayhi salam, right? He's going into the court of a complete absolute dictator, who has complete authority and is not subject to any checks and balances, and he can do what he wants with whoever he wants. Who's killing babies, and Musa alayhi salam is being told to go deliver this message to him. So he'll certainly need confidence to be able to do that. And then we noticed from the previous ayat that we looked at that it's related to having tranquility in Islam. So it's more than just Islam. It's more than just submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing what He wants us to do. It's finding tranquility in that. It's finding a sense of ease in being able to do that, and knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of take care of the individual as he's doing that. It's having a complete trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he will be with someone as he is doing whatever it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks. So this kind of tranquility that Musa alayhi salam is asking for is similar to what other prophets ask for in the Quran. So we have Ibrahim alayhi salam very famously asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show him, how is it that you bring the dead to life? So really asking for some sort of indication, maybe even explicitly some sort of miracle that will show Ibrahim alayhi salam how it is that the dead come back to life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ, do you not believe? He says, بَلَا وَلَكِنْ يَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. He says, I certainly believe, but it's so that my heart may find rest. And this is what Musa alayhi salam is also asking for. He's not after receiving this commission from God, he's not questioning God. He's not saying, I'm not the man for this. He's not saying that I don't want to do this in this dua. He's submitting, absolutely, but he wants to have a sense of tranquility in his heart, a sense of peace with the decision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made on his behalf in his heart. And finally, we have this idea of certainty, of knowing that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you to do is certainly the best thing for you to do. And as we mentioned before, this is going to be attained for Musa Islam, and it can be attained through us, is attainable by us through constant dhikr, through remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which has an incredible effect on the heart. And the next thing he says, Rabbi shrah li sadri, he says, وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي, and make my affair easy for me. So what does this word yusr, or ease, mean? So we see it's used elsewhere in the Quran for smooth flow, فَالْجَارِيَاتِ يُسْرًا, by the winds that blow smoothly. So the description that's being given there, or the picture that's being depicted for us there, is a wind that is blowing fast, but it's blowing smoothly. So it's not facing obstacles in its motion. It's not being thrown into a sort of a convoluted state or a chaotic state as it's blowing. So the idea of yusr in the Quran is not just for something to be easy, but for something to be smooth, something where the obstacles that one might face have been removed. And what really shows is submission, because what Musa Islam is asking for is not that the mission that he's being given is be changed or altered in any way. What he's requesting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to accomplish the mission that he's been set, but to accomplish it in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes the obstacles from him, right? So there's two types of ease, in other words. There's ease where you have a choice between different things that you might do, and you choose the easier path, right? So you have a set of essay questions that you can answer, and you choose the easiest one on the list to answer. That's one type of ease. Another type of ease is you do what's being asked of you, but everything that could get in the way, everything that might prevent you from doing that as well as you can, is removed from your path. Sorry, I just lost connection there. Okay. Let me just see if I'm still sharing screen. Can you still see the screen okay? I don't think you can. No. Okay, I'm going to assume that everything's back. I just lost connection for a second. So that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's what Musa Islam is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him. Not to change the mission, but to make this mission that he's given him easy for him by removing its obstacles. Bear with me. And how is this achieved? We know elsewhere in the Quran that this is something that is achievable through taqwa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِ يُسْرًا. Whoever fears Allah, whoever has taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has consciousness and amrihi yusra in Surah Talaq, he will make his affair easy for him. All right. So if you look at this incredible progression now that we see in the dua of Musa Islam, he first put submission to Allah by having his breast expanded so that he has confidence and he has certainty and he has tranquility in his innermost being with what it is that God wants him to do. And after that, he asks for his affair to be made easy for him. Right? So he knows that if he is able to submit and therefore achieve sharh sudur, achieve tranquility, achieve taqwa, that is the key to making his affair easy for him. So there's a really beautiful lesson in that for us, that ease and facilitation, it comes through dua, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a key for that as well. And that key is taqwa. That key is mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a means for our affairs to become easy. And in Surah Al-Shu'ara, we have this parallel ayah. قَالَ رَبِّي إِنِّي أَخَافُ أَن يُكَذِّبُونَ. My Lord, I fear that they will reject me. So this is really interesting. Why is he afraid that they will reject him, right? So this is the dua that Musa alayhi salam makes in Surah Al-Shu'ara. What does it matter if they reject him? I mean, if they reject him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with him. He'll simply destroy them, and he will rescue Musa alayhi salam and the Israelites. So what is the fear that Musa alayhi salam is expressing here? He wants the best even for Pharaoh, I think. He wants them at this stage to be guided if it's possible for them, because he knows what's in store for them if they reject his guidance. And he knows that it's now down to him. If they reject him, their salvation and their destruction is going to hinge on that. So this kind of sentiment of wanting what's best for Pharaoh, the enemy of the Israelites, the massacre of the children of Israelites, this is something now that the dua of Muslims move to in Surah Taha. So he says, and untie a knot from my tongue that they may understand my speech. وَحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِنْ لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Okay, so what's going on here? So we know from the biblical account that he says, I'm slow of speech. The word is heavy. I'm heavy. It literally says, I'm heavy of mouth and heavy of tongue. So slow of speech and slow of tongue. So what exactly does that mean? Is it talking about a speech impediment? Is it talking about getting nervous very quickly? It's possible it's referring to both, but he's clearly worried that he's not going to be able to communicate the way he needs to communicate. And in fact, this is a very common at the start of prophecy, when a prophet is first communicated to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first thing, and this is a recurring theme in the biblical accounts of the beginning of prophecy, the first thing that happens, the first thing that the prophet says is some kind of problem that they have in being able to communicate the message. And the same thing we find with our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he was commanded to read, to iqra, he said, I don't know how to read, or I don't know how to recite. I'm not a reader, I'm not a reciter, right? So it's the same thing that Musa alayhi salam, same sentiment that he may be expressing, that he's not very good at this. He doesn't know how to communicate eloquently. But what's his actual reason for bringing this up? So in the biblical account, he goes on to say, send someone else. Oh my Lord, please send someone else. And you see something similar to that in Surah Ash-Shu'ara as well, something that could be read in that way. But what's very clear from Surah Taha is that he's not bringing that up. He's not bringing up his slow speech or his speech impediment in order to get out of this mission, right? Because he says, untie my tongue so that they may understand me, right? So the Quranic reason for bringing up this problem that he has is not to convince God to find someone else in his place, but rather to enable him to overcome the hurdle that he sees as preventing him from doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to do. And again, you can see a really beautiful progression in dua. So it went from a prayer for certainty and for tranquility of the heart and for confidence with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mission, to then a prayer for ease and facilitation and removal of obstacles generally, and then a specific dua for a specific obstacle that he can see confronting him. Okay, so I already mentioned this. So what is meant by him saying I'm slow of speech and tongue? So it may be referring to a speech impediment, or it may just be referring to the situation that he's going to find himself in. As I mentioned at the start of the dua, just before we started looking at the dua, Musa alayhi salam is in many ways a very unexpected candidate for this role. He's going to be put into the lion's den, as it were. He's going to be put into a very difficult situation. And it's very natural for him to think ahead and think, my tongue is going to be, I'm not going to know what to say. I'm really going to struggle. That they may understand my speech. يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. So this is really interesting. He's concerned for their understanding. And that's, I mean, in a sense, the message that Musa alayhi salam is delivering to them isn't very complicated. He's telling them, stop killing babies and stop enslaving people, my people, for absolutely no crime that they've committed, and let them go. That's not a very complicated message, and yet he wants to ensure that they understand it, because he has an awareness that when people are blinded by faithlessness, when they're blinded by disbelief, when they're blinded by their own power, they will consciously fail to understand even the simplest of messages. And Musa Islam is taking that onus on himself. I want to be able to do everything I can do to communicate this message to them and make sure that I've left no stone unturned in them being able to understand what it is that I want to say. He's not saying that, look, this is so straightforward. If they don't get it, they deserve destruction. And that's, I think, something really important for us to bear in mind, that his people at this stage were going through absolute, really hell on earth. And Musa Islam's concern is that he wants to be able to communicate the message to the leaders of the people responsible for that oppression in a way that they will understand, and therefore maximize their chance of actually reforming their own behavior and of submitting to his demands without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then punishing them. So it shows that he's taking the tasks seriously, right? It's not something that he's being frivolous about. And there's a lesson that, as I say, in terms of communicating Islam to others. So here we have a prophet of God being sent to one of the worst human beings who's ever lived, Pharaoh, committing what is obviously a heinous crime, and making dua that his ability to communicate to that individual is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates for him, that they may understand my speech. So we have to, I think, remain humble in terms of our own ability to communicate, and what if that communication isn't being received the way we want it to, in terms of what our religion is, and in terms of inviting people to our religion, in terms of looking to ourselves and thinking about, has that communication been made in a way that they understand our speech? And appoint for me a helper from among my family, Aaron, my brother. Okay, so waj'alli waziran. So he calls Aaron here a wazir, Harun alayhi salam. Make me a wazir. The wazir is from wizard, from burden. So he wants someone to share this burden with him. Okay, so it shows, first of all, the importance of family. So if you look, he says, appoint for me a helper from among my family, Aaron, my brother. So first he mentions his family, that just give me someone from my family, and then he gets specific. And he says, make it Aaron, my brother. So an interesting question is, why ask for a helper at all, right? This is a mission that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he's already asked that he expand his breast, give him confidence in completing this mission. So why do they need anyone at this stage? And this is Musa alayhi salam appreciating that we live in a world of asbab, we live in a world of means, where there is cause and effect, and him taking that seriously, and him realizing that having someone to share your burden with you is something that makes your affairs easy for you. And so he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him that. So first he asked for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly to enable him to do everything that he wanted him to do. And then he's thinking strategically. So if I'm going to carry out this task, what do I need to do? What plan do I need to make? And now he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for success in the plan that he's making, namely his brother helping him in that coming to fruition. So we're taking the asbab seriously, seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help with the asbab. So it's really beautiful. He asks Allah directly, and then he thinks about, what do I need to do to make this work? And he asks Allah's help at every stage, right? So he's thinking, I need my brother to be with me for this to be successful. Allah, make Harun alayhi salam a partner with me in this affair. He could have just taken Aaron with him, right? Harun alayhi salam, he could have just said, come with me, come to the court of Pharaoh. But he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him blessing in that decision. And this again we have in Surah Al-Shu'ara, and my breast will be straightened. So he's talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about what will happen, what he fears the consequence will be if he goes to Pharaoh alone. He says, my breast will be straightened, so will be constricted. My tongue will not be unfettered, so I'll be tongue-tied. I'll be nervous. I won't know. I won't have the correct use of words. So send unto Harun. So let this message go to Harun alayhi salam. So we see there, that's maybe closer to the biblical story where Musa alayhi salam says, I don't want this, let someone else do it. But we can see from Surah Taha that that's not what's intended. What's intended by send unto Harun, send this message to Harun, to Aaron alayhi salam, is let him be someone who shares with me in this message, who shares this burden with me. And what's really beautiful is that despite Harun alayhi salam making this preparation and begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to let Aaron share this burden with him, when he actually gets to Pharaoh's court and he has this confrontation with Pharaoh, and I would encourage everyone to read that dialogue. It occurs in several places between Musa and Pharaoh. Pharaoh is supremely obnoxious and he is supremely condescending, and he throws every kind of trick at the book at Musa Islam. He reminds him that we raised you here and you're a criminal, and who is this God that you're talking about? We have absolutely no idea what you're talking about here. So it's absolutely everything to belittle Musa alayhi salam and his message. And yet the response is from Musa alayhi salam. It's not from Harun alayhi salam, right? So in the biblical account, it's one of the reasons that it's clarified why it is that he wants Aaron to come with him, is that Harun alayhi salam does have eloquence in speech. And yet when it comes down to it, it's Musa alayhi salam who responds. We hear nothing from Harun alayhi salam in the court of Pharaoh. So you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can make your dua come true in ways that are completely unexpected. So he thought that if I can just get to the court of Pharaoh, and if I can have someone with me who's able to communicate better than I am, I'll be able to accomplish this task that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set me. So he's strategically planned this out for himself. He's made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly for help, and indirectly he's asked for help in the means that he has chosen to deliver Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's message. So everything's going according to his plan, and yet when it comes down to it, it's he himself whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the ability and capability to communicate directly with Pharaoh. It's a really beautiful situation, and really something that is a recurring theme in the Quran, where du'as are answered, but not in the way you think they'll be answered, because it lets you know that really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always completely in control. So through him strengthen my back and make him a partner in my affair. So azar, ushdud bihi azri, strengthen my back. It can also mean strength. It's going to strengthen my strength or give me strength to accomplish this task. And through him, so right, ushdud bihi, through him. So this is clearly Musa alayhi salam acknowledging that he is asking for, that he is taking the means, that he's not just asking for a divine miracle to accomplish what needs to be accomplished, but he's thought this through and he's decided that Aaron is the one that he needs to help him accomplish this task, and he wants Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless that decision. So I just wanted to think about the structure of the dua as we approach the close here. So there's these verses, ayat 25 to 32 that we've looked at. So if you look at the opening to 25 and 26, he said, my Lord, expand for me my breast, make my affair easy for me. And then if you look at the closing verses, through him strengthen my back and make him a partner in my affair. So the opening two verses have my breast, my affair. The closing verses have my back, my affair. So kind of my front and my back, and then my affair is sort of repeated. And in the middle, you have this parallel dua, untie a knot from my tongue, right? This kind of dua. Appoint for me a helper, that's 27 and 29. And then you can't see the parallelism very clearly here, but it's much clearer in Arabic. So you have this kind of long dua followed by kind of a short consequence of that in 27. So wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli waj'al li waziran min ahli haruna akhi. So you can see this really short ending two du'as, untie a knot from my tongue, appoint for me a helper from among my family, and then a really short ayah which tells, which kind of gives the consequence of the way that Musa wants that dua to be accomplished. So you can, if you look at it color coded, you can see that there's a really beautiful structure to it. And that structure actually tells us something really important, because the first half of that dua is, like I said, Musa directly asking for help in accomplishing this task. And the second part of that dua is Musa planning what he needs, what the strategy he's going to adopt, and then asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help in the success of that strategy. So he wants direct help and indirect help. Really, really beautiful. So then he says, that's the end of the dua then. It's sort of in the surah, you have these long E endings. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني. So you have these several ayat which have this E ending, which mark the beginning and end of the dua. And then the surah goes back to its usual rhyme scheme, which is an A ending. كي نسبحك كثيرا ونذكرك كثيرا. All right, so that we may glorify thee much, or you much, and remember you much. So this is mutual support. So he's asked for Harun al-Islam to be someone who accompanies him in this mission, in this task. And then he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala why he wants this. He says, so that we can so that we may together glorify you much, and we may together remember you much. So he's recognizing here the importance of mutual support, that if they're together, they can remind each other. If they're together, they can, when things are not going well, when it seems as if the mission might fail, they can remind each other of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence. That's really interesting. This Musa is communicating directly with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yet he recognizes the need for good human company, all right, especially within his closest circle, his own brother, and the benefit that will have in enabling him to continually remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is really important for us when we're thinking about wanting to accomplish something, wanting to better ourselves as Muslims, wanting to maybe take on an act of worship that we don't regularly do, whether it's praying more regularly, reciting Quran more regularly. We can pray directly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables that, and that's absolutely something we should do. And we can also at the same time pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us in the company of people through whom that will be accomplished, right? Because that's just as important. And that's what we see Musa doing here. So you see, he's taking the means even for tasbih and for dhikr, right? So for glorifying Allah, declaring him being above everything, and for remembering him, even for ibadah, he's taking the means. He's recognizing what it is that is going to enable that, and he's confessing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what the ultimate purpose of asking for help is. You know, ultimately he needs Harun alayhi salam, not just so that he can confront Pharaoh, but for something much more important than that, which is that he can continually remain in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and continually remain in the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the final ayah, truly thou dost ever see us. There's there in Arabic, innaka kunta bina, I think that's how it is, innaka kunta bina basira. The kunta suggests past tense, but it can in Arabic also, in Quranic Arabic, also be used for the present. So you have ever been watching over us, or you are ever watching over us. And both of those meanings are valid here. So he's sort of recognizing that all help is ultimately from God. And he's also recognizing past favors, that everything that happened to us so far, Musa Islam's miraculous escape from death as a child, his escape from Egypt, his status as a refugee, and being able to prosper and find family as a refugee, all of that has been from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been watching over him every step of the way. And he's just saying, I know that you've been with me, and I know therefore that you will continue to be with me. And it's a beautiful way to finish a dua, with praise and with hamd and with recognition that as we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us more, we are at the same time acknowledge as best we can everything that he's already given us. So I think we'll leave it there. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين. Alhamdulillah, I hope it's been of some benefit.